Hey everyone, welcome to Data and Donuts. My name is Aaron. I'm here with my friend and colleague, Kathy Booth. And today we're going to talk about the Launchboard and all the cool features and new things that are coming ahead. But before we get to that, I'd like Kathy to share a little bit about herself.
Thanks, Aaron. So I work with WestEd, which is a nonprofit that supports educational institutions in increasing equity. I've had a long history of working with the California community college system. I think I started about 20 years ago, worked on projects like technology-related skills, was the first executive director of the research and planning group, and then did a stint sort of embedded in the chancellor's office working on data tools.
Excellent. And so as you mentioned data tools, I've heard many people say, I love the Launchboard, I use the Launchboard. And for us who may not be as aware or use it as much, I use it all the time. But for others who may not, what is the Launchboard?
So the Launchboard is a series of 5 dashboards that are put out by the Community College Chancellor's Office, and they're hosted on a project of the Chancellor's Office, which is called CalPass Plus, which is basically a voluntary intersegmental data system. So the reason that there's 5 different dashboards is that they're each serving different purposes to give information that's intended to be useful to non-researchers, which I know is sort of shocking, but the idea behind it originally, even the name, is that they were intended to be ways to free the data, basically get information to people who historically had not had access to information, to launch data conversations. And they really are, in my mind, they're almost more of a process than a thing, because they show the shift that happened in the way our system thought about access to data over the last decade. So if you'd like, I can tell you the origin story.
Please do.
So once upon a time, not so long ago or far away, there was a conference that was happening with mostly folks who worked in CTE programs. And this was a group of people that was really concerned about the fact that they didn't have access to the information they felt they needed to understand whether their programs were effective. And that was because at that point, there was almost no employment-related information that was available to folks who worked at the colleges. And so particularly for CTE programs, where sometimes people have really great outcomes without actually completing a degree or certificate, this was a big concern because we were very focused on the completion agenda at the time. So people got together and they started first and said, what if we did a survey that would collect the information about what happens to students after they leave us? And that became the CTE outcome survey, which is now done for all colleges, for all students that took at least 9 units or finished the CTE program. And when that was so successful, this group of practitioners would get together. They had these things called data dinners at the conference and dream up new ideas. And the Launchboard was the second big idea that this group came up with. The idea was just, let's start out with a couple of data points that would tell the story of our students a little bit more effectively. So there was an advisory group to the Chancellor's Office that brought together a whole bunch of people, and we actually handed out these teeny tiny Post-it notes, and people were to write down the data points they wanted. We said 5 would be a lot. Now across those 5 dashboards, there's probably 250 data points. And that really shows the shift in how people became much more eager to get a variety of information. But it also represents sort of this push-pull, which I think is really true in dashboards. When we gave people 5 data points in the beginning, everyone was like, this is great, I need something more. And then we built out dashboards that had dozens or hundreds of data points, and people would say, this is overwhelming, there needs to be less. So one of the reasons that you see so many dashboards in the Launchboard was the recognition that sometimes you need to group information differently for different purposes.
And I think just thinking about how the dashboards in the Launchboard have really, well, say, evolved over time, really tied directly to what in the past we used to have a trillion different metrics. Like I remember that, and they moved to common metrics. And so to help build consistency, but I think you really pointed out some key points is individuals, faculty, non-faculty really wanted to have access to data when maybe data didn't exist. And I think that was a really large unmet need that you were able to fill. And really with that, thinking about that, how can it be used by faculty and leadership? As you said, this is basically data for all. We'll just call it that, like data for all. What would recommendations, like you said, there's a variety with CTE, but what has it really grown into? If you could mind sharing maybe more of the different components, or not even the components, but the different types of the 5 dashboards.
Absolutely. So the one that most people are probably aware of is the Student Success Metrics dashboard. So this became sort of the accountability framework that the Chancellor's Office adopted a couple of years ago. in direct response to the issue that you mentioned, Erin. So that basically there were lots of different initiatives and they had lots of different metrics, which were almost the same, but not exactly the same with each other. And so the idea was, this was actually an initiative called Simplified Metrics originally, to try to just get down to the same set of measures we would use consistently across different investments that the state was making with the colleges. What's really interesting about this particular dashboard is that it's based on the student's educational goal. So it recognizes that what success looks like for someone who's trying to master English as a second or third language is different than someone who's trying to transfer to a UC. So there are a set of metrics that are associated with the major student journey types that our colleges serve that represent them getting into our institutions, the progress they make, what success would look like, and what happens to them after they leave us. So for example, if you're looking at an ESL student, being able to make progress on an established structure that's used by the feds to understand acquisition of English language, especially academic English, is a better measure of progress and learning. Whereas if you're a transfer student, you really want to get through that transfer level English course in your first year. And that's going to be a different class probably, especially if you're just starting out and learning English. So that's the kind of things that's different. So it can be really useful if you're just trying to understand how well you're serving different types of students. And the major student types are those that are building basic skills like English language, getting their GED, foundational literacy issues. The second journey type is people that come in to take very, very short CTE sequences. So there's a recognition that there's also long CTE sequences like the business ADT, but for some folks, they're just coming in for a short-term certificate. So they're going to have different measures from those folks that are pursuing a degree or transfer, which could include CTE disciplines. And then we show undecided students, because one of the things we know is that when students don't have some support to figure out the right way forward, they might get caught in eddies. So it helps you like juxtapose the difference when someone is directed to when they're not. So that's the first and major dashboard. My favorite dashboard is the community college pipeline. This is actually represents where the projects started. So we co-designed the Launchboard with the field. So when I was embedded with the chancellor's office, I was in the field somewhere in the state every single week for about 2.5 years. And we would just go out, we'd show people prototypes. We'd say, do you like it? What do you want changed? We burned the thing down and rebuilt it like 5 times in that time period. So the community college pipeline is really a program review tool. So you can go in and you can pick a program using a top code and then figure out sort of there's just dozens and dozens and dozens of data points that tell you all sorts of things about students' experiences in your college in particular programmatic areas. And it allows you to compare it to other institutions or see regional views. So it's got the most information in it. Probably the most significant dashboard that we have related to the nation is the adult education pipeline. So it is very, very rare that states are gathering and displaying information about adult education and non-credit. So this is a dashboard that combines information from K-12 adult schools and our non-credit programs and community colleges and shows how people are making progress through adult education and if they're able to make it into credit-bearing coursework and what happens with them. So it's a significant way for us to work on equity goals because, of course, it is immigrants and people that have historically not been successful in conventional education that we can make the biggest difference with getting them to living wage jobs. So then some of the other ones, there's a couple that are specific to investments that the state makes. So there's the Strong Workforce Program dashboard, which is just a subset of metrics that are specific to the investments and the goals that the state had related to current technical education. There's a very old dashboard called the K-14 CTE transition tool, which is going to get replaced with the K-12 Strong Workforce Program tool. It helps us understand what's happening for that work that we do jointly with K-12. And then there's the Guided Pathways dashboard, which is focused on basically momentum points in the very first year that a student is enrolled, which is intended to help you figure out as you're making your guided pathways reforms if you've got early wins. It's not comprehensive, it doesn't show you completion because we're really trying to look at just those first progress metrics. Are people enrolling in more units? Are they getting to their transfer level math and English? Are they coming back fall to spring? And then there's a whole suite of resources. So when we were out in the field, basically, if I got asked a question 3 times, we made a resource that explains it. And we did it in multiple formats. So there are very detailed things if you're somebody who likes all the little details. There are infographics if you just want a picture to understand what's going on. And there's some in-between resources, some videos, things like that, that make it easier to understand how to use the tool.
See, that's awesome. And it really kind of leads into what we were talking about earlier, or what you maybe mentioned a little bit earlier, what I call the ecosystem of data. Launchboard to me is really turning into that broad ecosystem. And really thinking about the new thing of the whole concept of the cradle to career system. How has the Launchboard really informed that? And what's coming?
So Cradle to Career is a new data system that's being built for the state of California. So you may know that California is one of the only states that does not have a holistic data system that links information from different educational segments like K-12 to community college to 4 years, as well as other sources of information that help us understand educational outcomes like employment information, workforce training, social services, teacher credentialing, early learning and care. So what happened is a couple of years ago, a piece of legislation was passed to set out the idea that California was actually going to do this, and there needed to be a planning process. So for 18 months, I had the honor of being the lead process facilitator for the design of Cradle to Career. And what was really exciting is that the governor really set forward a vision that will help California leapfrog all other states. So in some ways, it was really good to go pretty much close to last, because we could look at what had happened in other places and figure out how we wanted to do it maybe a little bit better in California. So a couple of the things that are significant, I mean, there was a direct knowledge transfer of all of us who'd worked on the Launchboard, realizing that dashboards are not the end all be all. So dashboards actually are useful to a very small number of people, because most people don't take in information that way. Early on, when we were doing the analytics on the Launchboard, we discovered that it was the export feature that was the most popular. And at first, I took that as a sign that somehow we'd done something wrong, until I realized that really when people are having conversations where they're using data to make a decision, they don't want all of the data. They want the data points that are most relevant for the decision they're trying to make. So really, the dashboards serve the purpose of making it easy to sort of group information together and get it out into the public domain. And it makes things, it's like directional signage, where you can say, whoa, what is that college doing that they're getting so many students to their transferable math class? Or, wow, when we compare ourselves to the rest of the region, we're not doing as well at getting people to living wages. I wonder what's going on there. So we took that idea in Cradle to Career and realized that there needed to be different ways for different types of users to get to information. So there will be dashboards that will be on the Cradle to Career system that look at key transitions between educational segments. So for example, for K-12 students, where do they go to college? For community college students, what happens to them after they transfer? How swiftly do they get to that bachelor's degree? If we're trying to contextualize why it is that foster youth are not getting all the same benefits out of our systems that maybe some other students are, we can be looking at them in context for access to other types of social services that might be really important for them to be able to focus on learning. So there'll be those types of dashboards that'll be available. There will also be a query builder tool. So this is more like Data Mart on steroids. So there are 200 data points that are going to be in the Cradle to Career system. And you'll be able to drag and drop any combination of variables and come up with your own summary tables. There'll also be the ability to go in and request anonymized individual level data. If you're a researcher, they were trying to do an evaluation, this group of students got the treatment and this group didn't, and you need to actually know who they were. There'll be the ability to go in and in a secure data enclave, access information, and only the information you're allowed to have, and you can't take the data out, so it keeps it really secure. However, Cradle to Career is different for another reason, two reasons that I think are really important. As we were identifying who the users were, we thought a lot about what students and their families and teachers and counselors need, and they don't need anything that's in a dashboard or an analytical data set, because it's great to know as a teacher that 10% of your students are homeless. Understanding which 10% are homeless is going to make it much easier for you to understand the intervention you need to make. So what we did is we identified a couple of places where getting access to information down to the student level would make a difference, and we focused on college going. So there is an existing state resource called californiacolleges.edu, which is going to be expanded to serve all students in the state for free. And it includes college and career planning tools, the ability to figure out while you're still in high school if you're fulfilling those eligibility requirements for UC or CSU, what they're called A to G. And so you can fix and get the right math class when you want to go to UC before it's too late. It also pulls in electronic transcripts to make it easier to apply to college. And it will start to include information that will allow you to also apply for social services at the same time, like food or healthcare. We'll also be expanding eTranscript California to provide electronic transcripts when people are moving between colleges, including adding competency-based education-related resources like badges and industry credentials, so that we can really scale up all the ways that we're helping people continue to learn. So that's the second way it's important. And the third way is that it recognizes that the people who are closest to the data are just as important as co-interpreters, as researchers and policymakers. So there'll be all sorts of ways that community members can get in, look at information, and help make sense of it, so we do a better job at closing equity gaps.
That's amazing. I just listening to this, just so exciting. I'm like, where do we start? Like you lost me at like you have 200 variables. I was like, okay, let's go. And so I can't wait to hopefully be able to utilize that tool. That's so exciting. I have so many more questions that I know we don't have time for, but I think this really provides a great opportunity. And I know as this starts to roll out, there's going to be probably a zillion trainings and a lot of really interactives, as it has been in the past with the Launchboard. So I look forward to that. Thank you for sharing that. And so my final question is, I've heard a lot of transitions from people, from coffee to tea to coffee, both. What do you prefer, tea or coffee?
Coffee, absolutely. My children, when they were very small, knew that if they wanted my attention early in the morning, they needed to arrive with a cup of coffee. And I had one of those automated makers with a pod, so that even when they were like 5 or 6, they could come and have the cup of coffee. So yeah, that's definitely my addiction.
That's amazing. What's your favorite kind?
Dark.
Dark. Excellent.
Yes.
Excellent. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Kathy. As always, it's fun to hang out and just hear about the cool things you're doing. I am looking forward to the new Cradle to Career system. And once again, I just used the Launchboard just yesterday and just share with some colleagues. Here's how you can go to it. It's one of our easy resources, just navigate. And a lot of times, while we can produce data very quickly, I think having that centralized resource where there's a lot of consistency and longevity with that information is very easy to consume. And I also like the feature of exporting, where we can get to the data and just create our own dashboards and comparisons. So thank you so much for that. And thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you all again. Thanks again, Kathy.
Thank you.